Chief Investment Officer Gary Reynolds is here to explain why he's written his latest piece, Can a Resurgent Defence Sector Rescue Europe? Gary, please tell us, what have you written and why?
One of the problems Europe's had for many years is that it simply hasn't spent enough money. It's a bit bogged down with lots and lots of red tape, which is a problem, and it's had a problem with fiscal spending. So the Europeans are quite obsessed with state budget deficits, particularly the Germans that have this debt brake. And the debt brake basically means you can't run a deficit where the government overspends relative to income by more than 0.35% of GDP. And this has put the European economy under massive pressure. Now, if you compare Europe's economy with the US over the last 20 years wins hands down, despite the US being the epicenter of the global financial crisis. And whilst Europe's had to sort of bumble along at sub 1% growth, America has been up at over 2%. Now, Europe can look from one side of the Atlantic and say, yes, but you're running a big budget deficit. And the Americans said, well, who cares? Our economy's doing better. And that's absolutely right. So it's the Americans have had what you call a much more Keynesian approach, i.e. state should get involved to some extent to boost the economy. And after all, at the end of the day, it's not about the numbers, it's about the amount of goods and services that your economy can turn out. So why I've written this piece is because it seems to have taken a change of administration in the US and a war on its eastern borders to get the Europeans going for once, and it looks like they've really got their teeth into it this time.
Gary, jumping in to this white paper on European defence readiness for 2030, you include a quote in your article about Ukraine and it becoming a leading defence and technology innovation laboratory, and how you find that that's quite chilling. Can you just dig into that for us?
Well, the Ukrainian-Russian war has killed hundreds of thousands of people, and the paper in classic bureaucratic style describes it as a weapons laboratory. And what the paper says is this is a golden opportunity for the European defence sector to roll out new weapons and ammunitions and put them straight into the battlefield for testing. So they're almost saying we can use the current Ukrainian war as a way of finding out what really works in modern warfare. Put it this way, it's the Europeans saying we've got a golden opportunity right on our doorstep to develop a very, very successful defence industry.
A fertile industry on that note. And does this mean Courtiers is about to start investing in defence companies?
Well, it's very difficult to invest in defence companies in Europe because most of the big defence businesses are in America, and the European defence industry is run down. Sort of France, Sweden, the UK. And the UK is mentioned specifically in that EC white paper as having a strong defence industry that the EU should look to include in a common European strategy. So I guess this is one of the reasons why the agreement with the EC has been more easy to get to now, because when you've got an enemy on your doorstep, it changes people's mindsets. You know, it's a catalyst to bring the European countries together. But it's difficult, Leo, to invest in specific businesses. So if you take Rheinmetall, a German defence company, that shot up this year and is now trading at over 70 times earnings. It's more expensive than Tesla. And we're not going to go and start buying companies like that, which are a bit too small. But the knock-on effect from this defence spending, to put this in context, Europe is meant to spend, under the NATO agreement, or the NATO members, 2% of GDP on defence. That was agreed back in 2013, 2014. It's spent considerably less than that. In fact, not so long ago, Germany was only spending 1.5% of GDP on defence, whilst the US was spending 3.5%. No wonder the Americans got quite upset for providing a free protective blanket across Europe, whilst all the Europeans did was exported all their cars over the Atlantic to America. And that's going to change. Now, the positive thing with this is it's the spillover. So if you go chasing the specifics, I think you have risks. But if this marks a change in policy that will force more fiscal spending because of the need for defence, then that could be very positive, very, very positive for Europe, which is a lot cheaper to buy into from an investment perspective than America.
So how does this affect, if at all, the way that you and the investment team are looking at potential stocks and investments?
Well, I think you can look at this now and say US stocks relative to European stocks are expensive. And if the tariffs are going to cause a little bit of stodginess in the American economy, then perhaps those companies that have been growing their earnings at 10% plus for such a long time will struggle to do so. Meanwhile, European stocks are a lot cheaper, and there are some good businesses in Europe. And if this change of heart in Europe, where you're going to have more money spent on defence and more important, there's be a spillover into the economy, generally gets earnings going in Europe, gives a bit of a stimulus to the market, then there's a good chance for some of the European stocks to catch up. America is a wonderful economy and has been going back to the time that the nation was first formed. I mean, they are an absolute miracle. You get like a developed economy with emerging market traits, and it just drives on. But Europe's got a lot going for it as well. So I think what we've seen is an opportunity to start building a bit more diversification. You know, we always like that, in some well-priced European positions.
And just quickly, since I last spoke with James, how's the US dollar doing against the pound now?
US dollar's been weaker, which has been something which we sort of expected. So I think we're about 132, 133, and I don't think there's much chance of that coming back the other way. You know, the dollar's been really too strong for too long. And that's been a problem for the Americans because it means that their exports cost a lot more relative to, say, Chinese or European. So this helps the whole American position with a weaker dollar. And I don't think there's anything the Trump administration will want to do. You know, while Xi Jinping in China is trying to have a strong yuan, then America is trying to have a weak dollar. So actually the one thing that these two countries agree on is the direction of their currencies.
So if you're focusing more on Europe at the moment, there's no risk that you're going to miss out on opportunities in the US while the dollar's weak?
No, I don't think there is, because I think what you're going to expect is more. The problem is, as the dollar gets weak, we take the hit. So if we're holding US dollars and we're going to convert them back to pounds, and the dollar weakens, we get less pounds back for our dollars. So it affects our net investment returns. I think James made the point that we take a lot of our US position through futures, and that we don't get dollar risk with that. It's a very liquid market, but we don't have to take the dollar risk. So, you know, we've still got a reasonable exposure to America. We're not suddenly going to bail out and say America's done. It certainly isn't. But I think this driving American exceptionalism that we've had for the last 10, 15 years is arguably petering out.
And Gary, to close, by the time we publish, probably we'll know the outcomes of the EU-UK summit. What would you have liked to have come out before the announcements? What would you like to see?
I'd like to see an agreement that makes it easier for our businesses to trade with Europe. And this, I said this in the article, this presents an opportunity for a reset. Now, the government needs to be brave. And let me be very clear on this, because any time you get into the issue of Brexit, it's a political trap that you can fall into. I voted Remain, always been very open about that, because on balance, we had a government in at the time that wanted to stay in Europe, and I felt you owed it to the government to go with that. Now we're out, we stay out, and we use the opportunities that we've got with being out to reduce regulation, have a more dynamic economy. I think you need to be able to trade freely. It's positive both ways. And I think this is a chance with what the EC said in there about resetting the relationship with the UK on defence, for us to export more defence and set more agreements across the board to make it easier for our businesses to do business in Europe. And that's what I would like to see.
Perhaps that's something we can pick up on again in the near future.
Yeah, something to watch, Leo.
Yeah.
Definitely something to watch.
Well, for now, Gary, thank you very much, and thank you for your piece and your insight there. If you do have any questions, please speak to your advisor or contact us via the website. Thanks for watching.